All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a discussion of the novella The Gallant by Janny Wurts, who is the author of The Wars of Light and Shadow, to which The Gallant is related. And we're going to discuss in a moment how it's related and perhaps when you might want to read it. But first, let me introduce my guests. I have here below me Johanna from her channel. Johanna. Hello, Johanna. How are you?
Hello. So nice to be here among these three wonderful authors today.
Oh, yes, three authors. True. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. Well, it's lovely to have you and to be able to discuss another book with you, Johanna. And we have the author, P.L. Stuart, author of A Drowned Kingdom, both the book and the series. And book 3 is coming out here, isn't it, P.L.?
Yes, Lord and King Book 3 is coming out soon. But yeah, I'm so honored. Thank you so much for inviting me, Philip. It's wonderful to be here with you, Johanna, and Janny to discuss these fabulous novellas. I was very privileged that Janny sent me copies of all the novellas related to the Wars of Light and Shadow. And they were all fantastic. This is my favorite, though. The Gallant has a really special place in my heart. So can't wait to chat with all of you about it.
Oh, fantastic. And as PL just mentioned, the author herself, Janny Wurts, is here with us, and we are so privileged and honored and happy to see you today, Janny. How are you?
I am just fine, thank you. It's a great privilege to be here with these other authors and Johanna too. I'm thrilled that you're putting some focus on this short story that only took me about 10 years to write. What is that, 1 page a day for 10 years? No, it was the complexity of the ideas all fitting together in such a way that it would be cohesive. So we'll get into that, but
yeah,
I'm really thrilled that this world, this universe is getting some attention right now because so much love has gone into creating it.
Well, it is much deserving of the attention. I can tell you that. It is rich and it is layered and it is beautiful and compelling from everything that I've seen so far. But let's talk for a moment about first, where can people find this novella, The Gallant? Because it does not exist in a physical copy. Is that correct?
Not yet, no. It can be found on my website in the studio store. So www.paravia.com/studio shop. I'm the only Janny Wurts in the world. If you search my name and spell it correctly, you'll see the official website. The studio shop has a link off of there. So we have e-formats right now. Eventually, I'll be making a paper something, or I will be combining it with either other stories that take place around that time period, or possibly I might do sequels that are spaced 100 years apart. Ooh. This is a long-lived character, and the history is very checkered, and there's some very, very hotly interesting intersection points in history where this character plays a great big role. But I can't go into that because some of the things that those intersection points in history will be mentioned in the larger series. And I don't want to spoil anything there because I know a lot of people are just starting in.
And we are avoiding spoilers for the moment. In fact, we're going to tell people about the relationship of this novella, The Gallant, to Wars of Light and Shadow. We're going to have some non-spoiler impressions from PL and Johanna, and then we'll talk about some themes, and then we're going to get into serious spoilers. So just so people are aware, we are avoiding spoilers for the moment, but that is great. I will have a link to your website in the description below, so people can easily get there, but it is paravia.com. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, awesome. And now, since we covered that, I think it would be fun for you to tell us what you think about when should people read The Gallant in terms of, because I have a couple of different thoughts on that, and I wondered what you thought. It does take place about 500 years before the Curse of the Mistwraith, first book in the Wars of Light and Shadow. But as I was reading it, I was wondering to myself, would it actually be better to read this after Curse of the Mistwraith? And that might sound weird, but we'll talk about that in more detail. But what do you think? What would be the best time for someone to read The Gallant, Janny?
The people who have read the series all insist that you really should read the series first. The people who've never read the series at all and only saw the novella and weren't interested in reading a big long book, said, oh, it works just fine by itself.
Uh-huh.
So it's one of those two-pronged angles. It's like the Empire series. Do you read Magician first or do you read the Empire? It'll read more richly either way. There will be things, if you read it as an opener, there will be things that you won't see into the depths of. And there will be things, if you've only read book one, you won't see into the depths of when you read the novella. On the other hand, the story thread is so strong and the characters' interactions are so strong, you're going to get a story out of it either way. So I would say if you were one of these people that wants the big series to unfold the layering in the world slowly, as the series does, because the characters come in the main series not knowing anything, then leave it for later. But if you're one of these people that you read book one and you're about halfway through, you're going, why am I being shown all this? And you want to see a little more about how this world functioned before it got broken. This is going to give you a very deep look into how the cultures interfaced before they got broken.
Interesting.
And you can see the breakdown of society as the splits are starting to happen. Well, when you come to the main series, those splits are very much in place. We're now in an entrenched situation where nobody's talking to anybody. So it depends really what kind of a smorgasbord you want to read. Do you want to make the most out of the layers in the Mistwraith? It's still not going to spoil anything major. Or do you want to find it out more slowly and then come back to this and go, wow, before it was broken, this was something I didn't expect, or that was something I didn't expect.
Okay.
One thing people may not realize in the big series is these characters, every one of them, even the spear carriers, have history. And it's never as simple as people suppose. And when you come into the big series, you are led to believe that you're looking at a feudal aristocracy. You totally, completely are not. This story is going to rip that, a little bit of that to shreds, not completely, but it's going to show that the functional governing system on this world was not what you thought. I did this deliberately because there are so many layers and so much richness in this world. I had to take it slowly. So I left certain classic fantasy elements intact. So you can just read along and think you're reading something that's just like that until the stool gets kicked out under your feet and you hit the floor hard and you go, oh my God, I missed it all.
Yeah.
So if you go back after reading the Gallant and you look at Curse of the Mistwraith, you'll realize how much you missed. And you have not seen it all. Not even close.
Wow.
So what you're getting is a keyhole view. So that's what I would say is it's all according to your inclination.
Among other things, we'll talk about it when we get to the spoilers. It was mind-blowing what I learned about the magic of that world in this novella. That was one of my favorite aspects of this, actually. I was just absolutely in love with the magic that I saw unfolding in this. So we'll talk about that though, but I do want to get the non-spoiler impressions that Johanna and PL had after reading the Gallant. And I probably should explain that Johanna has read already Curse of the Mistwraith. So that's her context for this. And PL, you're further in the series of Wars of Light and Shadow, I believe. So we'll give that context as well. But Johanna, what were your non-spoiler impressions of the Gallant?
I think I was very impressed that for, I guess, what is 100 pages? I read it on ebook, so it didn't have the page numbers. But from what I understand, this is 100 pages in length. This feels like a full epic fantasy story in 100 pages. And I don't know how you managed to do that, Janny. And I was also very impressed with a lot of the tonal shifts that happen, because I do feel like we shift the tone quite a bit throughout the story, but it always felt, it felt like very harmonious the way that worked. I thought it worked very well. It felt very cohesive. And I do agree that you get a complete fantasy story reading this. Now, that said, I am going to be very curious to hear PL's thoughts, as he has read much further in the series than I have. But I felt like, having read that first book, Curse of the Mistwraith, I mean, it's hard to know for sure. I'm sure I would have enjoyed it quite a bit had I not read Curse of the Mistwraith, but I did see a lot of the connections. And after finishing the book, I noticed, and unfortunately, it's been a while now since I've read Curse of the Mistwraith, but I did notice a lot of familiar terms. And so I actually went to the glossary of Curse of the Mistwraith and looked back, looked up some of those terms again to familiarize myself. And then I realized, oh yeah, I do remember how that ties into Curse of the Mistwraith a little bit here and there. So yeah, I think you can go either way, but I do see how this could be enhanced perhaps if you have read more books in the series.
Excellent. Thank you. And PL, what are your thoughts on the Gallant, your non-spoiler thoughts?
Well, Johanna said it so eloquently. The fact that this book is only 100 pages and it encapsulates so much of not just the tone of the Wars and Lights and Shadow, but overall, I think the one thing that it does, and for me, this novella moved me to tears. The poignancy of the novella and the themes that it tackled. There was betrayal, bereavement, devastation. There's so much pathos. Love, sex, pleasure, pain, devotion was a huge theme that I found this book, and as it really shook me, especially as someone who's been in relationships. The relationships in this book between the two main characters, just I mean, it really was moved me, and but I think the one thing when we talk about the Wars and Lights and Shadow in relation to the Gallant is that when you read Curse of the Mistwraith and you understand what Varaine's role is there. Now, when we get to the spoiler section, we can talk about this more. And then now you read the Gallant and you understand where perhaps he would have a real investment in that that task that he's doing now. Because that's what really hit home. That once I read the Gallant, and obviously we can expand when we get into the spoilers, so I don't want to give away too much, but that really struck me. Now it really it was again that much more poignant, knowing what he's doing in Curse of the Mistwraith, and now reading the Gallant, understanding why this would hold such importance to him. So it was just phenomenal.
Wonderful. Yeah, I would agree with both of you. I think you both said it very well. I think this is, in many respects, a wonderful taste of what you can expect in some respects from Wars of Light and Shadow. The layers and the complexity packed in some beautiful prose. I think that's one thing I would like to pause on that maybe we haven't emphasized yet, is just how distinct your prose is, Janny. It is really something. I feel like now that I've read 3 of your books, I could pick up any book by you. And I think at least, I haven't read your Empire trilogy that you co-wrote with Raymond Feist yet. So maybe that's a little different, but I feel like any book that's just purely written by you, I'd pick it up and without knowing you're the author, I'd say, oh, that's Janny Wurts right there. And the prose is so not just distinctive, but timeless and so conducive to immersion and the creation of a fantasy world. And that is something that I really enjoy. There's some gorgeous sentences in there that I had to just go back and reread. So congratulations on that. PL started to talk a little bit about themes there. So I'd like to do that. So anyone who hasn't read this yet can stick around a little bit longer. Unless you're really sensitive to spoilers, you don't want to hear about the themes, but we're going to keep the theme discussion for now, non-spoiler, and then we're going to get into the spoilers. So PL mentioned a few, and I'd like to get maybe Johanna's thoughts on some of the themes, and we go back to PL, and then Janny, if you want to talk about any of the themes that these two raise, and perhaps bring in some of your own as well. So Johanna, what was the theme that you appreciated or you noticed or you'd like to talk about from the Gallant?
Yeah, one theme that comes to mind is a spoiler, so I'm going to save it for later. But
okay.
But I think that PL nailed some of the main themes about betrayal, for example, and devotion. I loved the way you framed that. What also came to my mind was kind of like Pride and Prejudice, I guess, especially with the main character, Lysiane. How do you say her name?
Lysiane.
Yeah, I think that her, I mean, very much got the impression of like, this is a story about a woman who we judge at first sight. And I feel like we've seen that before in To Ride Hell's Chasm too, where we judge people by the way they look. And then we look deeper and we find out there's much more to a person than that. And how, I think also PL mentioned this, but the chemistry between those two characters was just outstanding. It was incredible. But I think that was something that came to mind. Now, the word gallant, I was not familiar with that term in this context. When I read the novella, I was familiar with the word gallant in music, because that's describing a certain type of musical style that was prevalent in pre-classical music, along with Rococo and Sturm und Drang. So I was familiar with that style and what it sounds like. And even though I wasn't familiar with Gallant in this context, the way that the story opens made me it was reminiscent to me of the Gallant feeling in a way, especially with just some of the courtly feel of it and the sort of frivolous nature of, I don't know, like the tone of the book really reminded me of that type of musical style. So I don't know if that really hints at theme as much as tone, but yeah, those were some things that came to my mind as far as echoing off what PL said as well.
Oh, that's one. That musical connection explains why you're giving it the French pronunciation, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which is fun. Yeah, that's great.
Is it Gallant? How do you say it?
Well, I was saying the Gallant.
Gallant. Yeah, that's right. Gallant.
But I think you're pronouncing that musical style correctly, which probably comes from the French, I'm guessing, right?
Gallant. So, yeah, probably. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's wonderful. But I love that connection. So Janny, just to confirm, you would pronounce it the Gallant, is that correct?
I thought of it as the Gallant because it was Varian was a gallant, and he's referred that way.
Yeah.
He was referred as the darling of all these women. Just a few little throwaway lines in Curse of the Mistwraith. So his history is kind of sketched in there, but I wanted people to be curious about that. And so pronounce it either way, because the musical connection to this world is very broad, especially when you get into the later parts of the series. You guys are still scratching the ground floor here. Yeah. The real open ups happen after Peril's Gate, because the foundation is built strong enough to support it. You'll see.
Well, even in Curse of the Mistwraith, the music is there.
Yeah. So this is, the big theme of this really is the main theme is it's a love story.
Yeah.
But there's so many things that branch off to it. You step through 3 different societies in this world, very distinct societies. So it's a very rapid, it's like gearing up. So cramming all that into 100 pages and doing it concisely and making all of the events fit through that. So you could actually see 3 layers of this society. There are more, but you could see some of the things working, and some things are still working in the background. And the laugh of it is, when I did Curse of the Mistwraith, the editor, the original buying editor, who's long gone, said, please cut this scene with the swamp, will you please?
Oh, no.
And I told the editor, this scene cannot be cut. And I'm not going to say why. It will become extremely apparent as you read the entire arc, the entire big series. So I insisted that I leave it in. And so always in my mind, there was this worry that readers are going to stick on the scene because the editor thought it slowed down the action. And so many people thought that this story wasn't what it was. And that happens a lot. I do a lot of my short fiction because people get things oversimplified. And I go, this is a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah.
So I set out, and I had one fan who screamed at me, I want the story, I want the story, I want to know who Varian is. So she screamed at me for years. So that's how it came about.
Wow.
So to me, knowing how it fits into the series, knowing how it fits into thousands and thousands and ages of back history, this is just a slice. There's a lot more in it even than possibly you can see at this stage. And probably I will reveal more in some other short fiction down the line. We'll see what happens with the final volume. So there were a lot of themes in this, and one of them that people maybe miss is the environment. The defense of the environment. In this world, there is an entire societal slice of society whose dedicated job is to protect that. and not see it destroyed, not see it upset. And so this is where a lot of the common European fantasy gets laid on its ear, because the value system at work on Athera is not the same as what we have here in any era of history, unless that society got conquered. Let's put it flat. So a lot of the value systems are coming through, and those themes play very strongly around these two central characters.
Wow. Yeah, wonderful. So I think let's get PL's final non-spoiler thoughts on the themes, if he has any more. And once he's done that, we can go straight into the spoilers. I'll give a warning before we do that, though. PL, any further thoughts on themes that you want to touch on?
Yeah, and just picking up a bit on both what you and Johanna said, Philip. Yeah, and Johanna, that was an exceptional point about things, people not being as they seem. You know, the whole concept of gallant. Of course, for me, I immediately, the word gallant, you think about gallantry. For me, I think about chivalry. I think about those notions of chivalry, etc. And I think about the fact that Varane, obviously, to his, you know, conceptually, he is, you know, a bit of a rake, right? A bit of a womanizer, a bit of, however, he has this deep, he falls deeply in love and has this deep abiding love, and it's his chivalry that puts him essentially in the position that he falls into, right? To seemingly his own detriment, and it's his love and his defense of the person he loves, and his insistence on abiding by those chivalric ideals that actually puts him in that situation. So that immediately, when I'm listening to when I initially heard the title of the book, and then I start reading, and then I get to that point, I'm like, those are the kind of images that it's conjuring for me, right? That this is someone who, you know, is being seen one way, but is a lot deeper than that, right? And that's definitely and what Philip had mentioned, yes. So the theme of, and again, I guess this is a bit more about things not being as they seem, but Philip specifically mentioning about the magic, in that this was the first time for me that the real, other than another particular chapter, which I won't get into because it's in the main Wars and Lights and Shadow series, and it's way too spoilery, but this is the first time for me the curtain was truly peeled back a bit for me to see the power and the glory and the wonder of you know, the magic. Let's just say the magic, right? This really hit home for me with a certain scene. It was just, you know, and the impact and the fact that you know, essentially two worlds couldn't coexist for the sake of one world. Like, but anyways, that's more a spoilery thing, but that was something I definitely wanted to mention.
Yeah, that's a highlight for me too, for sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I think we have danced around the spoilers as much as we can, and now it's time.
Well, there's a couple of things that we could say before we get to the
Okay,
spoilers.
let's do it.
Because there are a few things that I like to mix things that are opposites. And you can look at Bering as a rake, but you also have to look at the other side of him, which is his extreme appreciation of women. Maybe he slept around. Maybe that was the big thing that everybody laughed at. But the point was that the people he was with, he really saw them, and he really valued them for who they were. So it takes the idea of the rake or the womanizer and flips it a little bit upside down, because in many ways, this character saw into women more deeply than people who were monogamous. And I really wanted that to come through. So and that is mirrored by the duality of being able to live on this world that was not made for people, was not made for humans, and the dangers of that. And the dangers are not the commonplace dangers of, you know, monsters or anything like that. I mean, yeah, this world has monsters. There's a whole lot more to it. I mean, having something that is just so beautiful you can't bear it, and that being dangerous. So there's a lot of edges in this book because things were pushed. And so you can't really call it dark fantasy, but you can't really call it light fantasy. It's what I call full spectrum, where it pushes all the ends of the envelope at once. So you're not going to get
Love
fluff,
that.
but you're not going to get grimdark. You're going to get the barrage of everything all at once.
I feel like that's such an accurate way to describe your type of fantasy, Janny. It feels like prismatic is the word that always comes to my mind.
Wow. Yeah. Full spectrum. Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Beautiful. Was there one other point, Janny, you wanted to make before we get into the spoilers?
No, I don't think so. Just,
Okay.
Don't be afraid to read this if you don't want to read the big series, or if you think that the big series is reading slow. But one thing I would emphasize about my work in general, if you just came off the Empire series and you're 13, 14, 15, even 18, Wars of Light and Shadows is not written for that demographic. You might want some life experience. And if you read my books early on and went straight off the Empire as a teen, straight into Wars of Light and Shadows and said, I hated this, it really wasn't written for that time period in your life. So give it another look or not, I'm not going to tell anyone what to read, but this is not a lightweight YA type fantasy. I don't write youthful characters very often. I did in the Cycle Fire, but once again, I really don't write for teens. I'm not saying teens cannot read this and enjoy it. They can. But the average one is going to focus on something different. They want to see something else. So bear that in mind. If you've never read my work, think about that. I expect people to have a little bit of life perspective or the intelligence to wait for the hammer. It's not going to hand you things all at once.
Yeah, I would say that a reader experience is definitely going to be an asset in reading the series. But I would also argue that anyone who is willing to think about what they're reading could also enjoy this a lot. If you enjoy thinking about the layers and you enjoy thinking about the themes and you enjoy thinking about the connections that are being made, if you're that type of reader, even if you're a bit younger, I think go for it as well, I would say. This could be a really enjoyable series for you, but that's just my take, I think. So
And being willing to take your time with the prose too.
Yeah, for sure.
That's an exceptional point. Yeah, it's not something that you can, Janny says it all the time, it's not something that you can just gloss over, skip over. You're going to miss really critical points if you just skim through the prose, or if you just simply just caught up in the, oh, this is beautiful and this is lyrical, and you don't focus on what the words are actually saying.
Although it's okay
it isn't
to pause.
only about what happens, it's about why it happens.
Yeah.
And that involves societal themes and also personal themes. The character is the why it happens often requires some introspection. So my work tends to tell the extroverted story in an introverted way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It does both. And people are used to, oh, this is an introverted book, that's what I want. Or this is an extroverted book where what happens matters, that's what I want. Or I want the rules of the magic out in front of me. I don't drop all that on the table at once.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm straddling a line. I'm not writing an extroverted story or an introverted story. It is both. So again, it's that full spectrum. And if you're not ready for it, it can overwhelm you.
Yeah. Just like the magic. So, well, that being said, I think it is time for spoilers. And since we've been talking about the magic, maybe that's a topic we can start with. I was, as I said, blown away by what I was revealed in the Gallant. And I just thought it was simultaneously so beautiful and scary. And it really came home to me, as you said earlier, Janny. So by the way, spoilers now, everybody. If you haven't read the Gallant, you don't want to hear spoilers, this is your time to leave. Fair warning. But if you haven't read it, go out and read it. It reads fast. It's 100 pages or so. You get a great taste of this magnificent series. So that being said, here we go. So yeah, the magic. I mean, it was just, this is a world that what the humans, it wasn't originally made for humans. We didn't evolve in this world. And that becomes more clear here than I think it was for me in Curse of the Mistwraith, which was a point I really appreciated. So Johanna, what did you think of the magic here? And were there any revelations for you in regard to that?
I think like the first thing that's coming to my mind, especially when you say that, is I don't know that I framed it in that way or if I caught it in that way when I was reading it, but I was taking note of the fact that when Lucien has the miscarriage and it was conceived among the presence of the Paravians, that child was not going to come to bear. Like, and it was probably for the best because it would be a trauma to survive that. So it seems like this is I guess that speaks to the environment too. And also, I feel like there's this interesting connection between the humans and the environment, the evil creatures, I'm going to mispronounce this now, the Quetzals and the meth spawn, and how that's all interconnected, it seems like, to human beings and to our relationship with nature as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if I might be stretching that. I'm not sure. Those
No,
were just
when you hit the opening of Ships of Mary, or probably chapter 4, you'll start to see into some of that much more deeply.
Ooh,
great.
okay. PL, what are your thoughts on the magic?
Well, for me, because, we are, if we look at Curse of the Mistwraith, and again, for Johanna and you, Philip, who haven't read as far as I have, and I still haven't seen so much, I'm only about to start Peril's Gate with my next read in this series. The Paravians, these three magical races that seem to hold so much power and so much importance in the series. The centaurs, the sun children, the unicorns. Because this is the first time in the Gallant that you're starting to get some sense of just how powerful and potent and important they are to everything, right? And that scene is just so mind-boggling. And the scary, for me, my heart stopped when Varane wakes up and he's the first thing he says is essentially he prophesizes that right, to say she's gonna have a miscarriage. And and I'm feeling like, well, obviously this encounter with the Paravians has imbued him perhaps with something, right? If he, if we're just assuming he's just a regular man, and that this encounter, it's left this ripple effect, right? I had the feeling of a ripple effect, right, from their presence, from the presence of Paravians that's done this thing, right? It shattered something, right? And that impression that they're so powerful, again, as Joanne and Philip indicated, that their very presence alters, body chemistry, alters all these things, and that they are too powerful to come into contact with directly as a human being. Like, it was just mind-boggling. And then later to see them vulnerable, later to see how also vulnerable they are, that they're not invincible, right? And we can get into that later, but again, it's a spoiler, but that they're not totally infallible and they can perish, right? Like that really struck home.
It is interesting the way that magic kind of clashes with from what I understand. Like, for example, like with Varane, I got the impression that the Paravian presence almost enhanced the effect of the poison in some way, or had a more negative altering effect. I don't know if I misunderstood that, though. That's a question, I guess.
Yeah, my impression there was that the what was it called, sageweed, or I forget the technical name for it, but that it opened his mind in ways to the magic that then when he was much more sensitive to it when he encountered it. I think that's kind of how it worked, but
I think so. Yeah, is it Tienel?
Yes,
Tienel.
that's one, and we hear about that.
And you actually did encounter that in Curse of the Mistwraith.
In Curse of the Mistwraith,
Dakar used it to open up his senses so he could track what the Fellowship of Seven were doing. So pretty much it was a mix with a poison. It removed all the barriers. It scrambled his perception, so he was no longer calibrated to the five senses that we know. And he was no longer calibrated to past, present, and future, only to the present, because When you blow all the markers and you blow all the markers for time, time is a dimension. If you blow those dimensional markers, what do you have?
Yeah.
So he was perfectly sane, as Edley acknowledged,
Right.
if you understood what he was seeing.
Mhm.
But if you didn't, if you had no perception to see what he was seeing, and he had no initiate training to be able to sort this. So yeah, the subsequent encounter with his senses already scrambled and blown wide open when he encountered that presence.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It made an even bigger impression. And it made an even bigger impression the third time around because he was locked in that tower when they were doing the clearing. Bigger
Mm.
powers were abroad in that land during that clearing. So he got a triple barrage. So it was a strength of his character alone that kept him even together until he couldn't hold together anymore.
Yeah. Speaking of Edley, you've given us glimpses now of the kind of, this is a bit of an origin story too. I mean, it is primarily a romance for sure, but I love the fact that we get some origin story elements here. We get some glimpses into the various social groups that we have in Curse of the Mistwraith. You have the townspeople, and you have this rivalry already between them that exists already. And then you have people like Edley who are, what are they called? The people who have some familiarity with the various Paravians, but are still very much human. But they're the ones that can guide the townspeople, the normal folk, through the perils and to avoid the Paravians correctly. So I loved the glimpses into these cultures, and I thought that was really cool. And of course, this is the other side of the curse, well, the Mistwraith that shows up, right? That has been, when we in Curse of Mistwraith, the Mistwraith's been around for these 500 years or so. And now we're getting the other side of that. So, and it's interesting because we're not getting the direct view of what's happening with the Mistwraith right now. We're assuming that conflict is unfolding, even as this story is unfolding, but it's in a slightly different place. So I thought that was really cool too, that we're getting a glimpse into this place before the Mistwraith shows up and transforms everything. And with the Paravians, obviously to have them, we didn't get exactly like a close-up of them, but we felt their influence in this story in a big way. So what were other big moments for you, Johanna? Any particular? I want to let you guys have free reign here now. Is there a particular spoiler moment that stuck out to you, or an aspect of the story? Obviously, there's a lot of tragedy in this. As PL said, this was one that really got you all choked up because there were certain characters I was really hoping were going to make it and didn't. And Janny, what are you doing to me? How can you do this to this character? So did you find yourself, how did you find yourself in these particular big moments? Did you expect, for example, Licia to not make it through the story?
No, I thought she would make it. I was really surprised about that.
Yeah.
And it was incredibly heartbreaking the way she ends up dying, saving this little child's life after going through her own miscarriage. I was also surprised by the end because it seemed like Vrain's choice and how he, in that plane, had complete free will. And I thought that concept of free will was an interesting one because we already talked about how, I guess, under the influence of this type of magic being, having all the dimensions blown open, it felt to me, and I'm sorry, the sun's coming in on me, so I'm going to be like full of like weird lines. But it seemed interesting because to me, it seemed like he was like the most authentic human being, like a true, authentic human. And it's interesting to see that transformation from going from being the gallant, from being the most civilized of society, to having the most courtly graces and all of this, to being the most authentic human being and being in tune with nature and everything happening at once, having such foresight into everything that's going to happen. And then to go into the state at the end where he has total free will and he has a choice to make. And he doesn't choose to spend eternity with Lucien. So all of that was very surprising, but also beautiful and poignant and everything that, I don't know, I couldn't have thought of a more perfect ending, but it was still a surprising one.
Yeah. PL, you want to reflect on any of what Johanna said, or bring in some new points? I was very moved by how he would go back to Varane would go back to her grave every year and leave a token. I thought that was just a wonderful touch. But PL, what are your thoughts? Any special moments for you?
Yeah, no, I agree with so much of what you and Joanna said, and about that grave, the fact that the centaur erected the stone. So obviously, she and Varane were significant figures for, I believe, the centaur to actually do that. One thing that we didn't touch on that, and it almost I almost overlooked this because I reread the story twice, the Gallant. I almost overlooked just the fact because, and it's because of where I am in the reading of the Wars of Light and Shadow. I'm very in the middle of the Coriani and the Fellowship and who they are and what they're doing.
Ooh.
It's easy to overlook the fact that in the beginning of the book, there's a Coriani plot essentially to undermine crown rule, and it's to damage like the reputation of Rain's family. So I mean, this is something that again, there's Janny weaves so much into her books, so much into a 100-page novella like this, that it's sometimes you can be focused on one thing, but you got to remember this because this is going to mean something, right? So that was one thing that I really picked up on my reread of the book and the Koran's involvement. And I believe it was you, Philip. I'm sorry, I apologize. I can't remember, it was you or Joanne that had mentioned about, yes, the different cultures, yes, and the what now 5 books in the difference between the town folk and the clanborn, and what the clanborn do and what their place is in terms of caretakers and keepers and helping to preserve essentially for humanity what the ancient laws are and traditions that involve the Paravians and their pact. That I think really comes through. Now you're looking at this novella that's set 500 years before. This really struck home for me. Now that I'm reading, I'm 5 books into the main series, so that was something that definitely was left a big impression on me in terms of the Gallant. So.
It seems like the Clanborn are these intermediaries between the Paravians and the rest of human society, that they somehow have these special abilities, more sensitivity, whatever it might be. Maybe there was some agreement made when humans showed up that, okay, there has to be this group of you who will be these intermediaries of a sort. But sorry, Johanna, you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No.
Are we talking about, was this group the group that ended up with Lucien and Varane after?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And Edley, of course, was the first one we met in this story. Yeah.
And Edley is the one who died?
Yes, who was killed in the ambush. Yeah.
Right.
That was another one that I was like, oh no, I liked her. What?
I know, I did too.
Not nice. How could you do that?
I know, that was a surprise as well. I was going to go back to what PL said too. That was something that I didn't catch when I read it. And then when I went back and reread certain things I highlighted to make sure I understood what was going on, that was one of those things that I thought, oh, those are those enchantresses from Curse of the Mistwraith.
Yeah, the Coriathane. Yeah.
And they forced him to target Varane. So from what I understand, if I got this right, because I had to reread it a couple of times to make sure I understood it. So Varane's cousin, it seemed like he was in the wrong place at the wrong time sort of situation. He overheard some type of thing that would lead to his death, but he ended up bargaining out of it by conspiring with the enchantresses. And the debt that he owed them was to target Varane. That was what I gathered.
Yeah, they're up to no good, these Coriathane. And it seems like they're kind of, at least in this novella, they seem like the behind the scenes villains here. And then, of course, in Curse of the Mistwraith, which I'm not going to get into because some people might not have read that, but
that's true.
They seem to play a similar role for the most part. So I'm very curious about them. And I wonder if we're going to get some more complexity, because I have my issues with the 7 as well. I think that they're I think that there's some stuff about them that bothers me, frankly. So I don't think this is just a straightforward, here are the baddies, here are the good ones, and they're fighting each other. There's more going on here, I think, than meets the eye. But I don't know. We can't say more.
You
Probably.
don't know, oh, more than meet the eye, you betcha. Because how can you really say they're the goodies, the baddies, until you know their history, until you know their story, until you know what their moral high ground is, until you know what they're actually doing?
Yeah.
You can't know. So I'm just sitting here with duct tape over my mouth, because the big series is going to take some of the points that came up in the Gallant and it's going to expand on them. So you'll just be ready for it a little more. Some of the things that you're asking about, Johanna, it's going to come out in the bigger series. Everything interlocks very, very tightly. But one of the things I was trying to do here was what happens when you have two societies, both of which are needed to function on this world, but they can't really talk to each other because the town people can't see what it is the clan people can see. The separation of cultures became toxic because they weren't talking to each other. They couldn't bridge the divide. One set of people had one set of perceptions about the land and what it could do. The other ones saw for real what would happen if the other faction did what it wanted to. So the interface got strained. And the othering that you see going on in Curse of the Mistwraith, when you open up, that schism is complete at this point. Nobody's talking to anybody. People have forgotten a lot of history, and some people have remembered a lot of history, but it's very, very complex. So it's actually kind of fun. You'll enjoy this, watching people come into the series early and say, oh yeah, well, these are just the barbarians and these are just the, until the lid gets blown off. So that schism of society where you have two sets of perceptions driving what their moral high ground is, and there the twain will meet if they can't find a way to talk to each other. And in this case, how do you talk across a culture where the very perceptions that you're operating on cannot be shared?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to quickly say, having read the other, except for one of Janny's novellas related to the Wars of Light and Shadow, again, that she was kind enough to send to me, some of those novellas even more expand that understanding of what and who the clan-born are versus the townsfolk. There's a couple in particular, so I strongly recommend you read those novellas. Janny can tell you the order and what not to read until you've got to a certain point in the Wars of Light and Shadow series. But one thing that struck me, I don't think this is too much of a spoiler, that overall my statement about the clan-born that I've felt up to this point where I am in my reading is that, you know, it's frequently the groups that are persecuted the most that are the ones that are the most misunderstood, that are perhaps the ones that have, in some cases, the most to offer. And, you know, that's what really strikes me about the clan-born and what their role is. And, you know, that really hits home for me and is hitting home for me more and more as the further I read in this story. And the fact that, well, I'll say this, that, you know, when you look at the townsfolk, because so much of it, as Janny says, it's more tied to that feudalism concept, that you know, a concept of feudalism and sub-infeudation and you know, the entire, you know, that medieval kind of power structure. And that's what you associate with the town-born, you know, the power, the privilege, and ruling because of power and privilege. Whereas the clan-born, it's much more about that free will that we're talking about, right? Elected leadership, free will. It's so. I think as you go further in the series, you'll start to see more and more. Again, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but more and more what they represent and the duty, kind of like this sacred duty that they have. That a lot of it for me is based on is sacrifice. So.
Yeah, wonderful.
So one thing that stood out to me with the clans people, with the nomadic people, was this one particular paragraph where Varane, they have this, a chance female hunter exclaimed, shocked to surprise by a quiet approach inadvertently brought within earshot. Our young are not left to commune with the mad because drawn to sympathy by their blood heritage, they lie at risk of beguilement. Unformed and untrained, their talented senses might stray into to a dangerous state of empathy. And so I
Wow.
thought that was, to me, indicating that they have this heightened sense of empathy. They have these heightened senses that is, I think that is unique to them. Whereas like what you were saying, PL, with the feudal court system of the townspeople, there's a lot that's highlighted about how Lysiane is almost the exception, that she would be a woman who would care for Varaine to the extent that she did. Whereas other women would be more flighty and would run away, or where were those other women, you know, when who sought him so much when he in his time of need, that she was the one who was there. So she was exceptional among the townsfolk for that. Whereas these children, they are automatically prone to deep sensitivity and empathy.
Yeah. Very interesting that empathy could be dangerous, right?
Mhm.
I love that. And
Mhm.
and how empathic it turns out this magic, this world is, how it opens you up. And that was some of the most moving parts too for me, where Varaine being opened up to the sense of connection and oneness and nature, and that how he would lie in the grass and look at the ants, right? And that thing, and it was just wonderful to see, but also kind of frightening at the same time, and how that being opened up put him in a different place where he became something foreign and frightening to other people. Because even as much as we get angry at the guardsmen who were mocking him and being so crude, I think there's fear underneath that reaction as well, right? I think that they were expressing their fear in a very unhealthy way, but that's kind of underlying their behavior. They're uncomfortable with this. They maybe deep down sense that there's something going on here, that there's vulnerability in empathy, isn't there? There's deep vulnerability, and that's frightening to a lot of people. So
Mhm. Mhm.
And with the empathy, I think, and those are excellent points. It just, so much of that I saw in the very nature of the relationship between Lysiane and Varaine, and that, you know, for me, as someone who's been married and who has had children, you know, and I think a lot of us are here in that boat. It's, you know, we know that relationships are so much more about just the flowery, nice times when everything's going well, and, you know, everything's, you know, it's really about the tough times and getting through the tough times, and watching Lysiane's immense empathy for Varaine, not just her love, but her empathy and her understanding, and being able to give him what he needs and persevere and insist that no, you know, he's gonna be okay, he's gonna make it, and being willing to, you know, change his dirty clothes, and, you know, like, do all the things that, you know, we know as partners and or parents you're willing to do, because, you know, naturally, you know, the person needs that. That really struck me. Like, that was, you know, it was so moving. And of course, being linked to the main series, knowing that one of the main characters' empathy is that one main trait that
wow.
stands out and is such an overarching theme. That's what really was like, that was punching me in the head reading the Gallant. So
Yeah, that's my favorite character so far in this world, but we can't talk about him because he's not in this. But yeah, very cool. Jenny, any thoughts on any of the stuff? Whoops. And she'll be back. There
I have
she
a terrible, I should get a longer extension cord because it keeps pulling the thing over. Luckily, it hasn't smashed the tablet, so we're still good.
This is functional. That's good.
I'm a 2-year-old. I break things. What can I say?
But any thoughts on any of this business about empathy and all of that? And it is, in a way, empathy or compassion that gets Lysia killed, you could argue, ultimately, because she comes back for that child whose life she saves. And it was such a heart-wrenching moment. And so in character for her too, though. So she's a beautiful character, just beautiful.
Mhm.
Anything that you'd like to say about empathy?
These two characters are so similar in that way, because she gave everything to save that other person's child because she knew what it was like to lose one.
Mm.
think about that. And then think about Varian. Could he really have done anything different? Would he want any other pair of lovers or any other families or any other people torn apart as he was?
Mhm.
And so that decision becomes something so much bigger. And when you look at his beginnings to where he wound up, it was a huge step for him to take. He becomes a master spellbinder. He becomes a very powerful character. And you see him very briefly in Curse of the Mistwraith, but you will see him as the series goes on. And so, you know, thinking back to his origins, you'll remember that. He'll have a place in your heart.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful. That is beautiful.
I also loved the role. And Janny, your camera is off. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know why. It could be, could it be the internet connection did that, or?
Possibly, but if you see a thing on there that says stop or start video, you could hit
There's
that
nothing.
icon. Okay, well, we'll deal with this. So you're still here. That's the main
I'm
thing.
looking for it. Wait a minute. Oh, here we go. Start video.
There you go.
Did it come back?
Nope,
No.
not yet. But not to worry. There was one character too who was accompanying Varane, and that was the clansman, the guide, the veteran. There you go.
There you go.
The veteran. What was his name? Seth something. Seth.
Seth.
Seth. Thank you, Seth Ant.
Mhm.
I really loved what you did with him as well in terms of this theme of empathy, where he's in a position where I have to warn these people that this horrible thing is coming. And not only that, but after it was over, the fact that an act of mercy in the situation of these people who have been poisoned was to end their lives, and that he had to go through that, not just once, but repeatedly. Wow. I mean, just wow, what he had to go through. How tough did he have to be? But that was an act of love, ultimately, wasn't it? What he was doing. Any thoughts on that, Johanna?
No, I just completely agree with you. I think he was a very courageous, brave character. He was dutiful and inspiring in a lot of ways. Even though he didn't have a lot of page time, I think I just appreciated his character quite a bit.
Yeah. PL, any thoughts on Sethant or anything else that relates to this theme of empathy?
No, I would agree, and I always watch out in almost any book for those gruff, very stern, characters that seem crusty, but typically there's always a lot of depth to them. And it's funny how many characters are read in fiction that, you look at them one way, but when you really get to know them, you realize that underneath all of that exterior, there's usually a reason for it and why they're that way. And he was definitely one of them. But I want to quickly say as well, going back to what I couldn't say in the spoilers, was that, again, without spoiling Curse too much, seeing what happens, that it's all that how Lysiane meets her fate, and what happens with the attack from the mess spawn on the town, and what Varane goes on to do in defense of the land, that he specifically asks, for the apprenticeship with the fellowship, and that's going to be a big part of his role. That really hit home. Like, it would not have impacted me as deeply had I not, if I just read Curse, realizing that, okay, this is what he does, and he's a sorcerer, and this is part of his role, because they all have roles. Now looking back to see why that would be so important to him, not beyond just protecting the greater good, that he has a personal stake, a personal reason for wanting, that really impacted me, right? So without reading the Gallant, and without reading Varane's backstory, and without reading, what something that would mean to him, it would not be as impactful now that I'm thinking about reading Curse.
Well said. Very well said.
I had a question, Janny. So I noticed this one line where Varane is saying, I guess, over Lysiane's dead body, that he would have adorned her, instead of with pearls, he would have adorned her with rose quartz. And I wondered about the significance of rose quartz. It seemed like she was honored with rose quartz in the end as well.
Well, you think about a pearl, it's a grain of sand that gets coated and protected until it's beautiful.
Mhm.
But what was beautiful about Lysiane was her heart and her emotions. And
Mm.
rose quartz is associated with emotions and being open to all of what emotions can do. So that's why the significance of the rose quartz.
Yeah, it just happens
Also,
to be
rose
my
quartz
favorite crystal too.
doesn't easily form crystals. That's why you almost never see crystals. And when it does, they're very, very small. So she was a personality that did not crystallize around one idea or one thought. She really worked from her heart.
Hmm.
Yeah,
What a
that's
beautiful
wonderful.
question with a beautiful answer. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And it just reminds me again that attractive. She was beautiful, but she wasn't the typical, court lady that, she didn't, she was more robust figured, et cetera, right? She wasn't, this according to what most people would consider, but yet she was beautiful and she was attractive. And Varane, who could have any woman he wants seemingly at court, is so strongly drawn to her and falls for her. And again, as Jay said, falls for her spirit, her inner beauty, right, over
Yeah.
everything else, and that she proved to be, more than worthy of that, and all, and her inner beauty, etc., and her inner spirit saving him in the end. That he made the right choice. He picked the right person. That that those other more frivolous beauties wouldn't have saved his life, right, in the end.
Yeah.
And
That's great. Yeah, I took it myself that as I was reading, the two things saved Varane. I think most people who in his situation would have simply died. They would not have survived this. Two things saved him. One was, of course, Licia. Yeah, her love for him sustained him. She kept him alive, literally, by feeding him and getting him through. But it was her love for him that even just lying next to him as he's comatose. I think he feels that the presence is having an influence on him for sure. But another thing I think that helps him a lot is that even before he's poisoned, he was already a sensitive person. He was already someone who was empathetic. And he shows that in how he treats Licia. So those two things, I think most people would not have survived his situation. But because of those two factors, I feel like he's able to end up where he is at the end of the story and try to even be, turn it into something where he can make a contribution at the same time. But that's meaningful to him as it turns out. And it is very poignant, the fact that he asks to be the guardian watching over these creatures that are a danger to life. So that's really amazing, I think. Yeah.
That's beautifully said. Yeah, beautifully said. I think like also with Licia, it's interesting with her too. I feel like these are just such equally beautiful characters. And I never felt like one weight was given to more of one character than the other in this case. And their chemistry was so beautiful. But with Licia, something else that comes to mind is like, yeah, she's described as kind of ungainly and having dull hair and maybe big feet, things like that. But she's so resourceful. The fact that, she is, somebody who could go to court, but then, she takes that back route to spy on what happens. She puts on, the bartender outfit or whatever. So she sneaks around. She's resourceful. She ends up knowing how to work with Varane to get him to escape, to interact with the nomadic group of people. So it seems like she doesn't let anything stop her from doing what she wants to do. And even though it seems like that's not really where her value system is anyway, where she could probably get caught up in the fact that she's seen as less attractive or whatever, and maybe try to make herself more attractive. I don't know, get caught up in that. That's not really where her mindset is. And I find that interesting to watch that, to track that even since the beginning of the book.
Yeah, that's exceptional. I did have a question for Janny because I want to make sure that I read this right. Because for me, if I did, it just made things even more, again, the sense of poignancy, and the sense of, and if I'm right, the sense of essentially self-sacrifice. So, if I'm reading it right, there was a point when Varane is about to take the poison, that he understands what's happening. He understands that if he drinks, he's going to be poisoned. And I guess essentially he does it, I guess, to save his cousin. So I want to be clear that that was the case, because if it was, it just adds to the sense of Varane, being willing to do that, to make that kind of sacrifice, like, is just, astounding, right? So I just want to understand if I read that right. Like, that's what I was getting out of it, that there was a point where he understood that if he drank that drink, and I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, that's fine, that something was going to happen.
I would say that absolutely he probably knew he was stepping into a trap. Not only Lysian saw it, he would have known it too, but he also would have had a very clear sense of family loyalty and knowing what was at stake. So he probably went into that duel knowing there was a trap laid. Whether he actually knew there was poison in that cup or not, that's not something I explored or know for sure, because I wasn't in his head. I did draw him to be a little bit distracted because he realized he had just met the love of his life. But I think, and that made him a little blind to what kind of trap he might have been stepping in. But I think his motivation at that point would have been disarm this trap any way it can be, so that the explosion doesn't go sideways. It doesn't take down the family. It doesn't take down the crown. It doesn't take down the people that are close to him. So in a way, yes, he did know. Did he know actually that cup would be poisoned, or the poisoned in the way it was? I don't know, because I didn't explore that aspect of his head. I did mention that there was a very strong odor to that poison, and that just the smell of it affected your senses right away, because Lysian picked it up just from the stains on her dress.
Yeah.
So this is one of those little things that, yeah, he probably knew there was something in there. But I chose to leave it a little bit ambiguous. But would he have done what he could to save the family and save the crown coming down? I think he would have, because that's who he was.
And that's fascinating. That's what I'd like to in my head believe, that he did in some way knew, and he was still willing to do it. And that so much fits with the kind of person that both of these main characters were, people that would sacrifice themselves for others. And that just makes what happened to them that much more devastating, but beautiful. And that's I guess my overarching comment about, we can talk about so many things we can praise Janny for so many things in terms of how she writes, her elevated prose, the themes, the depth to which she layers things, but it's the beauty of her writing. And that beauty comes out because she balances tragedy and darkness and bad things happening to good people so much with good things and self-sacrifice and these noble characteristics, that it just brings out the beauty of it. And I think that's, for me, now that I've read 6-7 books by, more than that now, sorry, probably 10-12 by Janny, that all of her books have that quality. Sorry, I was forgetting about the novellas. Those are books. So 10-12 books now I've read. All of her books have that quality. It's she brings out the darkness and these really dark things that happen. And wow, wait to read some of those novellas. Like, some moments will just be shocking, but then you realize the beauty, right, and the nobility and the grace and these great. She shows us the worst of humanity, but that brings out the best. And it's one of the things that I think makes me addicted to her writing.
Yes, I love that. That was so beautifully said, PL.
Very well
and I
said.
feel like another thing I would just add to that is to what you just said, because it was so perfect, is just how that's reflected in the magic too. So it seems interesting to me, because I was talking in the beginning about the tonal shift that's happening throughout the story, because at the beginning, this doesn't really read to me at the very beginning like I'm going to be reading some big epic fantasy story. It feels more like a classical courtly love story. but the character, the richness of character is there. The virtues of these characters is there. And then when you read on and you read about things like the electromagnetic signature and the infused auras and how the people's vibrations are things that are real in this world, that are even visible on certain planes in this world, you realize all of that is like part of the magic and part of the beauty and the wonder and the whimsy, with the dark tones as well, of course. But that's also been there from the beginning too, just in a more subtle level. So I feel like we're just seeing different aspects of that throughout her writing, and it's just marvelous. It's fantastic.
Wow, both of you, PL and Johanna, I really appreciate what both of you just said. I think that's beautiful. Might be a good place for us to leave, actually, unless anyone wants to make any further points. Those are just wonderful ways, I think, of summarizing the experience here. So thank you so much to both of you. Janny, any final thoughts for us? And I'll give PL and Johanna a chance too, if they have any, but would you like to leave us?
Well,
with
just
any
one
thoughts?
last little point, and that is that
Yeah.
every impactful thing that happens in our lives is a crossroads, and we have a choice. And we can either step into the empathy of it and really feel it and turn a corner and make a change, or we can harden and become the cynic. And to me, the cynic is the greatest evil we can fall into as a society, because you've just said, I don't care, and therefore everybody else shouldn't care, and that there is no point to caring, that love no longer means anything, and it's a position where you shut down everything else. Everything else. So to me, it isn't the person who hates that's unredeemable. It isn't the person who has no boundaries and loves too much that's a laughing stock. It's the person who's the cynic, who's decided there is no meaning in this. And so all we can do is make fun of it and drag everybody else down to that point. So I think if you read my work and you look at the overall theme that's running through it, often it's that cynicism is what destroys us, the loss. That's what makes us give up hope. Anything that gaslights you into taking hope away. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there. So Varen's story really is a triumph. When you see what he goes forward to do in history, it is a triumph of not becoming the cynic, not becoming that is all there was, not saying I lost the love of my life and that was all there was, so I'm going to stop there. But taking that experience and throwing it forward into something much bigger. And I wish we had more of that in the world. So I put it in my books.
Wonderful. Well, and we're very glad you did. Final thoughts, PL?
No, just quickly want to say, Johanna, what you said was, that was just phenomenal. You know, what incredible insights, Johanna. That was so well said. And Janny, you know, that was beautiful. And you inspire all of us, I believe, and you certainly inspire myself as a writer. And I've said this before on previous podcasts. You know, if there was such a thing as performance standards for a writer, you inspire me to exceed them, because I look at you on that level, that all the things that you do with your writing just make me want to be that much better. And you know, I just, that's why you're my favorite author. I will read anything and everything you write. Hopefully I'll be blessed with a long enough life to do that, considering how extensive your works are. And thank you for writing the Gallant. And thank you for writing the Gallant and the Wars of Lights and Shadow, and it's my favorite series, and I cannot wait to continue to go forward. So Perils Gate in April. So
All right, Johanna, any final thoughts?
Oh, just thank you. Thank you so much, Janny. Thank you so much for passing along this ebook to me, for the chance to read it, because it was beautiful. I loved it. And it's made me all the more excited to get back into the Wars of Light and Shadow. So I highly recommend people pick it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I can echo that. And I want to thank all three of my guests. Johanna, we've been in so many wonderful discussions, and I'm always shouting about your channel, and I'm loving the fact that people are recognizing just what an important contribution, the importance of your contributions in our community. So it's just always great to chat with you. PL, I heard a rumor you're starting a channel.
Yeah, is that true?
Eventually, it'll start really slowly, just more eventually doing more page doing, because that's what we do with Stephen Taylor,
Yeah.
hosting more page showing episodes, and then it will grow from there. So it'll be slow and kind of organic, but
Okay.
just quickly want to say, Philip, obviously, how much I admire you and your work, and Johanna, same thing. What you do for BookTube, it's phenomenal. Philip, congratulations on the release. I finished the book. It is phenomenal. I'll be doing a detailed review soon, but congratulations. And thank you so much for having me and be able to share space with you, Johanna and Janny.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, PL. I appreciate that. And Janny, thank you so much. I am very honored that you allowed me to read The Gallant. And I am so excited about reading your series. And from what I've seen so far of the 3 books of yours that I've read, I can easily see Wars of Light and Shadow becoming one of my very favorite series of all time. And so it is just such a privilege and a joy for me to have this opportunity to chat with you. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me. And I want to say to Johanna and Philip, without you people, this series would be buried, because in many ways the field wasn't ready for it. The publisher wasn't ready for it. Seeing it come to light now when everything is completed it's making me so amazed, because I many times thought I was going to be finishing this as a labor of love and it would just be out there and have to do its thing. So I don't want any of you to underestimate what you are doing for authors, for books, for the ideas in books that so many times in this quick, let's have it now and have it all kind of culture, the deep looks into books is showing people the way of finding new ideas. And it's an immensely valuable resource. And PL, read PL's books. They are amazing. His Drowned Kingdom is astonishing. And what he's attempting to do is very, very bold and very ambitious and not at all lightweight. And it's a must read in the field. And Philip, good luck with your release. I've read it too. It is wonderfully crafted. And I think John Gwynn's audience will just take to this like a duck to water. And I'll be begging you for a quote in 5 years, because you should just be rocketing right up there as smoothly as that's written and as well integrated. And at that readership, I think will just take to this book. It had that feel to it. So I want to wish you the best. You'll know what it's like to be out there with a book title, but I'd like to see you have an effortless journey.
Well, thank you so much. And with that, I will thank all of our viewers. Thank you for watching. And I will have links to all the stuff we talked about and Janny's website, where you'll be able to get access to The Gallant and all kinds of other great stuff. If you want a map of that world, you can get it through her website. There's all kinds of great stuff there. Check out her beautiful art. We didn't even talk about your art, Janny, but everybody, she's as talented an artist as she is.
There's one back there. Look behind her.
And
There's
that
one back
painting
there
behind her right there, that is your own. And
Wow.
it is astounding. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the US cover for Trader's Knot.
Yep. That is
And that is
brilliant.
Davian on my right.
Brilliant. All right.
Oh,
Well, thank you.
boy.
Thank you for that little view. And everyone, thanks. And we'll be talking Wars of Light and Shadow in the future. PL's involved in a discussion series on Wars of Light and Shadow as well. So go and check that out. And yeah, so until next time, everybody, take care.